He was a man who believed money could buy anything: comfort, loyalty, even love. His life was built on glass towers and diamond promises, yet inside his mansion, his own son's heart remained out of reach. So one night, determined to fix the boy's loneliness, the millionaire lined up the most beautiful models in the city, their smiles painted, their charm rehearsed. He told his son to choose one, to point at the woman who would be his new mother. But when the boy's small finger trembled and pointed at someone no one expected, the room fell silent. The maid. The black maid. The mansion was silent, the kind of silence that didn't soothe but suffocated, where the ticking of the grandfather clock felt like an intruder. Every chandelier dripped with crystal, every hallway smelled faintly of imported roses, but nothing about it felt alive. This was Alexander Gray's kingdom, a fortress of wealth and steel emotions. The man was a titan in business, feared by rivals, respected by politicians, but in the stillness of his home, there was an emptiness money could not decorate away. He had a son, Liam, 9 years old, quiet as snowfall, always lingering on the edges of rooms like a shadow that didn't belong to anyone. That evening, Alexander arrived earlier than expected from a high-profile meeting. His polished shoes clicked against marble floors as he moved through the foyer, noticing something different. The air felt charged, as if something had been set in motion before he walked in. In the main lounge, a row of women stood waiting, each more glamorous than the next, dresses shimmering under the golden lights. His assistant, nervous but eager, explained the arrangement. Alexander had asked for the most refined, charming women in the city, each hoping to step into the role of a mother figure for Liam. It was absurd, yes, but in Alexander's mind, efficient. Love, he thought, was just a choice, like picking the right investment. The boy sat on a velvet armchair, small legs dangling, eyes wide not with excitement but something unreadable. Alexander's gaze swept the room, satisfied with his selection, certain this would solve the problem of his son's distance. But then, as he looked closer, he noticed Liam wasn't looking at the women at all. His eyes kept darting toward the back of the room, toward someone half hidden in the shadow of the doorway, a woman in a simple navy uniform, her hair pulled back, her hands folded nervously. She wasn't part of the presentation. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was the maid, Ebony, the one who quietly cleaned the rooms. Alexander never noticed. Something in her gaze met the boy's, and in that unspoken connection, Alexander felt the first ripple of something unusual, something he couldn't name yet, but it made the air in the mansion feel strangely warm. Dinner had ended hours ago, the models dismissed to their cars with faint perfumes lingering in the air, yet the boy had chosen no one. Alexander had brushed it off, telling himself they'd try again later, that children took time to decide. But as midnight crept in and the rain tapped against the glass walls, a sound stirred him from his office. At first, it was so faint he thought it was part of the storm, a soft rustle, a muffled sniffle. Then came the unmistakable sound of quiet chewing, slow and hesitant, almost guilty. He frowned, closing his laptop, following the sound down the dimly lit corridor that led toward the kitchen. The mansion felt different at night, shadows stretching long and heavy, the silence between each step carrying weight. When he reached the kitchen doorway, the sight before him froze him cold. There, under the warm hum of the refrigerator light, was Liam, crouched on the floor beside a small metal ball meant for the dog. His little hands were scooping something from it, his mouth moving slowly, eyes fixed downward as if not wanting to be caught. Beside him, Ebony knelt low, holding a spoon, her face pale with guilt and worry. She whispered something to the boy, words Alexander couldn't catch, before Liam nodded and took another bite. The ball was filled not with a proper meal, but with scraps of leftover stew, cold and hardened, something even the family's labrador had ignored earlier. Alexander's voice cut through the air like glass. What is going on here? Ebony's eyes snapped to him, wide and fearful, her lips parting as if to explain but no sound coming out. Liam swallowed hard, glancing up at his father with that same unreadable look from earlier. The storm outside rumbled, but in that kitchen, the thunder was in Alexander's chest. This was his son, the boy who had diamond watches gifted to him before his 10th birthday, eating from a dog's ball in the dead of night. And the woman beside him, the maid his son had pointed to, looked like she'd been caught hiding a crime. Only, something in her eyes told him this wasn't what it seemed. That maybe, just maybe, the crime was his daughter. Alexander's voice came out lower than he expected, tight with confusion and something else he didn't want to name. "Liam," he said, stepping into the kitchen, "why are you eating from that ball?" The boy froze, his small shoulders tensing as if bracing for a blow that would never come. Ebony rose slowly, placing herself slightly in front of him, her hands clasped together like she was holding back the truth. "Sir, it's not," she began, but Alexander's gaze cut to her sharply. "I asked my son," he said, each word clipped. Liam's lips trembled before the words slipped out in a voice barely above a whisper. "It's the only food that tastes like home." The sentence hit Alexander like a blade. "Home?" he repeated, his brows knitting. "The models, the polished dining table, the meals prepared by Michelin-starred chefs, wasn't this home?" Ebony looked down at the floor, unable to meet his eyes. "Sir, the boy, he doesn't eat the food from the main kitchen," she said softly. "He says it's too fancy, too strange." "I thought," she stopped, as if afraid the next words would seal her fate. "You thought feeding him from a dog's ball was the solution." Alexander's tone was harsher now, a reflex to cover the sting in his chest. Liam's eyes flashed with sudden courage, surprising even himself. "She didn't make me eat it here," he said quickly. "I wanted to. It's the only way I can eat without feeling watched." That word lingered in the air, heavy and accusing. Alexander opened his mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time, he saw his son not as the quiet, obedient shadow that trailed behind him, but as a small human carrying a hunger that had nothing to do with food. Ebony placed a gentle hand on Liam's shoulder, her voice steady now despite the risk. "He needs more than what money can buy, sir." The statement landed like a gavel. Alexander's chest tightened, his jaw clenched, but deep down he knew, she wasn't just talking about dinner. She was talking about everything. And in that moment, standing in his spotless kitchen with the storm outside rattling the windows, Alexander felt the first cracks forming in the life he thought was unshakable. The question burned in Alexander's mind long after they left the kitchen. He stood in the hallway, leaning against the wall, trying to make sense of what he'd just heard. How could his son, the heir to a fortune, feel more at ease eating scraps from a dog's ball than the gourmet meals laid out for him every night? Ebony's voice finally broke the silence, low and steady, as if each word carried a weight she'd been holding for too long. "Sir, Liam hasn't been himself for months. Maybe longer. I see it in the way he hides his plate under the table, the way he slips food into his pockets when the chefs aren't looking. He's not trying to be difficult, he just doesn't feel like he belongs here." Her eyes softened as she glanced toward the boy, who now sat on the couch clutching a small, worn-out stuffed rabbit. "He told me once," she continued, "that all the fancy meals felt like someone else's life. That nothing in this house feels like his." Alexander's jaw tightened. He thought back to the endless meetings, the business trips, the nights when the boy's goodnight kiss was replaced by a phone call, if it came at all. He remembered hiring the most expensive tutors, thinking that education would fill whatever gaps were left. But as Ebony spoke, the truth settled heavy in his chest. He'd been parenting with his wallet, not his presence. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked, though the edge in his voice was dulled now. Ebony hesitated, her gaze dropping. "Because, sir, I wasn't sure you'd listen." The words stung more than he expected. She told him about the little moments, Liam sitting with her in the laundry room, asking about her childhood. How he once confessed that she reminded him of the woman who took care of him before the adoption, someone who held him when he cried and never cared if his shoes were dirty. Alexander swallowed hard. He had never asked his son about that time in his life, assuming the past didn't matter, one's wealth had erased it. But looking at Liam now, curled up beside Ebony as though she were a shield, Alexander saw it clearly. The boy didn't just need a mother. He needed someone real. Someone who saw him. And that someone had been right here all along, wearing a maid's uniform he had never truly noticed. Alexander stood there, watching his son lean against Ebony as if she were the only safe place in the entire mansion, and the truth began to sink in with an ache he couldn't ignore. The cold marble floors beneath his feet felt heavier than ever, the chandeliers above him suddenly nothing more than lifeless ornaments in a house built to impress strangers but never to comfort the people inside. He thought about all the decisions he had made, each one justified in the name of providing. The endless business trips, the late nights, the gifts wrapped in gold paper meant to substitute for time. He realized now they had been nothing but distractions, bandages over a wound he had never bothered to look at. His son had been speaking to him in silence for years, and he had been too busy to hear it. The image of Liam crouched over that dog's ball wouldn't leave him. It was more than hunger. It was a picture of loneliness, of a child starved not for food but for something far more vital. Alexander's chest tightened as he remembered the boy's trembling voice. It's the only food that tastes like home. Home. Not this vast, echoing mansion, but a feeling. A connection. And here was Ebony, the maid he had barely noticed, the woman his son had chosen instinctively over a lineup of models, because she gave him something Alexander never had. Not beauty, not wealth, but warmth. For the first time in his life, Alexander felt ashamed not because of what others might think, but because of what his own child had endured under his roof. The storm outside rattled the windows, but it was nothing compared to the storm inside him. He wasn't the man he thought he was. He had failed, not in business or reputation, but in the one role that mattered most, being a father. And as the guilt settled into his bones, he understood that if he didn't act now, if he didn't change, then no amount of money in the world could ever buy back what he had already lost. The house was quiet again, but this time the silence wasn't heavy, it was waiting. Alexander stood at the edge of the kitchen, watching Ebony gently coax Liam to take a few more bites of warm soup she'd just reheated. No silver platters, no towering centerpieces, no army of chefs, just a plain ceramic bowl and the kind of care that couldn't be bought. He took a slow breath, stepped forward, and without a word, reached for another spoon. Ebony's eyes widened slightly, uncertain if this was anger or something else, but he only gave a small nod as if to say, "Let me." He crouched down so he was eye level with his son, the polished suit feeling strangely out of place on the kitchen floor. "May I?" he asked quietly, lifting the spoon. Liam hesitated, glancing at Ebony, then back at his father, as if searching for the catch. When none came, the boy gave the smallest of nods. Alexander offered the spoon, and for the first time in years, his son accepted something from him without reluctance. It was awkward, almost clumsy. Alexander was used to boardrooms, not feeding a child, but he stayed, letting the silence between them be gentle instead of cold. After a few minutes, Liam whispered, "It tastes better when she makes it." Alexander didn't flinch at the truth. Instead, he glanced at Ebony and said, "Then maybe she can teach me." The look on her face was a mix of surprise and something softer, respect, maybe, or hope. They finished the soup together, not rushing, not performing for anyone. When the bowl was empty, Alexander didn't retreat to his office like he always did. He stayed sitting there on the kitchen floor beside his son, his arm brushing against Liam's shoulder in a way that felt unfamiliar but right. Liam didn't pull away. It wasn't trust yet, not fully, but it was a crack in the wall. And Alexander knew, in that quiet, that if he could just keep showing up in these small, human ways, maybe, just maybe, he could start to become the father his son had been waiting for.